Alright, so this project starts with a substantial amount of birch that I cut years ago with the chainsaw in our backyard. Now, a couple sheets of good quality 3/4 inch plywood would be by far easier to use for this, but I don't want to spend the money on that, so I'm trying to use what I have. As you can imagine, there was a lot of work involved to turn this rough lumber into something useful. I literally worked the miter saw, the planer, and the table saw for days. And because I own just a small job site table saw, I had to use a long level with clamps to extend the fence, which helped me to produce a straight edge on the longer pieces here. That is a trick that I used successfully in the past already, for example on this Rustic table build. Now the first thing that I'm building here is the top of the tool chest, which really wasn't that complicated. Next, I worked on the framing for the carcass of the tool chest. Now all the framing parts are made out of 1.5 by 3 inch solid birch, and I used a router to cut a 3/4 inch wide and 1/2 inch deep groove in all of them. Building with solid wood here is tricky because I will have to make sure that seasonal movement in the wood doesn't cause any problems in the future, which is something you can ignore when you build with plywood. My sliding miter saw has this integrated block to limit the cutting depth of the saw, which is a super cool feature that I use quite often. It basically turns the miter saw into a radial arm saw, and that allows me to cut a tenon on the end of the framing stock. Yet again, I used the router with a 45-degree chamfer router bit to break the sharp edges and to create a nicer look. Along the tenon, I couldn't use the router, so a chisel and sandpaper did the trick here. Here you can see how I sample one of the sidewalls. I let all those little boards slide into the grooves of the frame without any glue. That way they can shrink and expand as much as they need to without putting any pressure on the framing. Of course I had to give it some room for that, so that's why the last board on the top doesn't extend to the bottom of the groove. I built all the panels kind of the same way, so I'm just gonna let the video roll. I think it is self-explaining for the most part anyways. To wrap up the work on the carcass, I installed 6 casters, each of them rated at 250 pounds of load-bearing capacity. And then I went ahead and installed tabletop expansion brackets. Now those are not just ordinary angles. If we zoom in, you can see they have a long slot instead of just a hole for the screws. This will allow the wood to shrink and expand, and the screws just slide with the material along those slots, while keeping at the same time the top snug against the carcass. Because wood shrinks next to nothing lengthwise, but 6 to 10% along the tangential vector, I had to make sure to install all the slots perpendicular to the grain direction. Now, of course, I don't expect that high of a percentage in shrinkage, since the wood is already sort of dry. Nevertheless, it still will move throughout the season, so I will have to be prepared for that. I also had a pretty good twist in the top here, but the brackets helped me to force it in place. Alright, now let's talk about the drawers. Yet again, I milled some birch into 3/4 inch thick boards, and then I cut a 1/4 inch groove on the router to accept the drawer bottoms. 1/4 inch wasn't quite enough, so I just widened that on a table saw in one pass. Now I decided to use old laminate flooring for the drawer bottoms that my mother-in-law saved from the local dump a couple years ago. You might wonder how well this material actually would perform as a drawer bottom. Now if I place a 2-inch wide strip of laminate flooring between the 2 blocks here and place a weight right in the center, I can measure by how much the material deflects, which is in this scenario exactly 3/8 of an inch. Now I can do the same thing with a 2-inch wide strip of 1/4 inch Baltic birch plywood, a very popular choice for drawer bottoms. It turns out it deflects by the exact same amount. So the laminate flooring has the same stiffness as plywood, it didn't cost me a cent, and it has quite a durable surface since it's meant to be walked on. All of that sounds pretty good to me. However, to help prevent any potential sagging in the future, I decided to install a strip of wood across the drawer bottom. For that, I used yet again the stop block on the miter saw to create a cutout in the drawer front and back. I actually took advantage of the bend in my 1/4 inch thick strip and let the arch work against the drawer bottom. This way you can create sort of a preloaded support. Did you ever wonder why trailer axles are bent? Well, that's because once they're under load, they are actually straightening out, providing an even contact surface for the tires. So it's sort of a similar concept. If you would have to pick one thing where woodworkers consistently go totally bananas and over-engineer the crap out of it, then it would have to be drawer joints. Now don't get me wrong, all those dovetail joints, the locking rabbet joints or even the crazy nap joint are great looking and well-functioning joints, but in my opinion they are completely unnecessary. I can tell you from my own experience that a simple glued butt joint with a couple screws like this one will be plenty strong enough. I spent already way too much time building the carcass and I have 12 drawers to build, which means 48 drawer joints, so I'm gonna try to keep that one as simple as possible. For the drawer handles I wanted a rail along the whole width of the drawer, so I cut out an angled profile on the table saw and then I trimmed the ends with a 45-degree angle on the miter saw to avoid any sharp edges. I used my cordless compact router to round over the edges and with only 3 screws I attached them to the drawer front. Now let's wrap this up and clean up a space so we can actually fully assemble this. Now, before I end this video, I thought I'm gonna share some interesting numbers with you. So let's start with the dimensions. The tool chest is 52 inch wide, it is 24 inches deep and 37.5 inch high. Now the full weight of it, without any tools in it, is at 320 pounds. Yep, she is heavy. So that leaves me with 1,180 pounds that I can load up in tools and hardware. I use self-closing heavy-duty drawer slides that are rated at 100 pounds each pair. Now let's talk about money. I wrote myself a list so I don't forget anything. I spent $170 on the drawer slides. I used about $30 worth of stain and varnish. The expansion brackets that I used for the countertop were roughly 20 bucks. The chrome numbers that I used for the drawer fronts, that cost me $30. And I also bought a couple hundred screws to actually install the drawer slides, so that was also roughly $30. I got the casters on sale for 30 bucks. That was a really good deal. And last but not least, I bought $60 worth of rubber drawer liners for some of the drawers. So all of that adds up to $370. That is really not too bad for a tool chest that is built like a tank and hopefully lasts for generations. I did consider just buying a tool storage cabinet, but they're often well above $1,000, so I think it was worth the effort. Alright guys, now this was a really important step towards converting the shop into a workable space, and by the time you're watching this, I will be working already on the next step, so stay tuned for that. There's a lot more to come. This was just the beginning. Now thank you for watching, take care everyone, and I will see you the next time.